The therapist's office smelled like failure and expensive leather, and Marcus Ashford decided he hated both equally as he stared at the cream-colored walls that probably cost more per square foot than most people's monthly rent. "Mr. Ashford, I really think you should consider alternative therapy," Dr. Richardson said, her perfectly manicured fingers tapping against her notepad. "Traditional talk therapy isn't working for you because you won't talk." Marcus shifted in the chair that had never quite felt comfortable despite 12 sessions. "I'm here, aren't I?" "Physically, yes. Emotionally," she tilted her head. "You've been coming here for 3 months, and I know less about you now than I did after reading your intake form." He wanted to argue, but she was right. Ever since the accident that took his younger brother 6 months ago, Marcus had been going through the motions. Wake up, run his commercial real estate empire, ignore the gaping hole in his chest, sleep poorly, repeat. His assistant had scheduled this therapy after he'd snapped at a junior partner for breathing too loudly during a meeting. "What kind of alternative therapy?" Marcus asked, already planning his polite refusal. "Art therapy. There's a studio downtown run by an exceptional instructor named Elena Torres. She specializes in grief work through creative expression." Dr. Richardson pulled out a business card. "No talking required unless you want to. Just you, art supplies, and whatever comes out." Marcus took the card between 2 fingers like it might bite him. "The Lighthouse Art Studio. Tuesdays and Thursdays, 7 to 9 in the evening." He had conference calls scheduled during those times. Important calls with investors in Singapore and London. "I'll think about it," he said, which they both knew meant no. But that night, alone in his penthouse apartment overlooking the city, Marcus found himself staring at his brother's last text message for the 1,000th time. "See you at dinner, big bro. Got something exciting to tell you." Except there had been no dinner, just a phone call from the hospital and a drunk driver who walked away with minor injuries while Daniel died on impact. Marcus picked up his phone and sent an email to his assistant. "Clear my Tuesday and Thursday evenings starting next week." The Lighthouse Art Studio occupied the ground floor of a converted warehouse in a neighborhood Marcus rarely visited. His driver pulled up to the curb, and Marcus stared at the large windows glowing with warm light. Through the glass, he could see easels and tables covered in paint tubes and brushes. His stomach twisted. "Should I wait, Mr. Ashford?" his driver asked. "No, I'll call when I'm done." Marcus stepped out into the cool evening air, buttoning his suit jacket out of habit. A bell chimed when he opened the door. The space was larger than it appeared from outside, with high ceilings supported by exposed wooden beams. The walls displayed artwork in various stages of completion, from abstract splashes of color to detailed portraits. The smell of paint and turpentine replaced the sterile scent of Dr. Richardson's office. "You must be Marcus." He turned toward the voice and felt his rehearsed greeting die in his throat. The woman walking toward him wore paint-splattered jeans and a white t-shirt with a colorful handprint on the shoulder. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she had a streak of blue paint on her cheekbone that she seemed completely unaware of. She was perhaps 30, with warm brown eyes that held none of the clinical assessment he was used to from Dr. Richardson. "I'm Elena Torres. Welcome to Lighthouse." She extended her hand, realized it had dried paint on it, and laughed. "Sorry, occupational hazard." Marcus shook her hand anyway, feeling the slight roughness of dried paint against his palm. "Nice to meet you. Dr. Richardson told me a bit about your situation. I'm sorry for your loss." Elena's expression was genuinely sympathetic, but she didn't dwell on it. Have you ever done any art before? Not since elementary school mandatory classes. Perfect. No bad habits to break. She gestured toward the back of the studio where several easels were set up around a large table covered in supplies. This is a private session, just you and me. We can work on whatever speaks to you. There's no right or wrong here. Marcus followed her, his expensive shoes clicking on the concrete floor. Everything about this felt foreign and uncomfortable. I don't know what's supposed to speak to me. Elena started pulling out various supplies, arranging them on the table with practiced efficiency. That's okay. We'll start simple. Sometimes grief lives in our bodies in places words can't reach. Art gives it another way out. She handed him a large canvas and gestured to an easel. Put that up there. He did, feeling absurdly out of place in his tailored suit surrounded by creative chaos. Now, I want you to pick 3 colors. Don't think about it, just grab whatever catches your eye. Marcus stared at the dozens of paint tubes spread across the table. His hand hovered over them, and he felt ridiculous. He was Marcus Ashford. He closed deals worth millions of dollars. He employed over 300 people. He did not stand in art studios picking colors based on feelings. You're overthinking, Elena said gently. Your hand was moving towards something before your brain got in the way. Trust your instinct. He grabbed 3 tubes, black, gray, and deep blue that was almost purple. Elena looked at his choices but didn't comment. Good. Now squeeze some of each onto this palette. She handed him a wooden board with paint wells, as much or as little as you want. Marcus squeezed out measured amounts of each color, keeping them separate and tidy. Now pick a brush, any size, and put something on that canvas. It doesn't have to be anything. Just move the paint around. He selected a medium-sized brush, dipped it in the black, and made a single horizontal line across the canvas. Good, Elena said. She was working at her own easel a few feet away, giving him space but remaining present. Keep going. Marcus added another line, then another. They were straight, controlled, contained. He was making a grid, he realized, boxes within boxes. How did your brother die? Elena asked, her voice casual as she mixed colors on her own palette. The question caught him off guard. Car accident. Were you there? No, I was in a meeting. The words came out harder than he intended. He pressed the brush against the canvas and the line came out jagged. He frowned at it. Don't fix it, Elena said. Keep going. Marcus dipped his brush in the gray and dragged it across the canvas, cutting through his careful grid. The movement felt aggressive and something in his chest loosened slightly. What meeting? Elena asked. Acquisition deal. Office building in the financial district. He added more gray faster now. Daniel texted me during it. I didn't respond because I was presenting. And you think if you had responded, things would be different? The brush snapped in his hand. He stared at the broken pieces, paint dripping onto the floor. Sorry, he said automatically. Don't be. Brushes are cheap. Elena brought him a new one, larger this time. Use this. Marcus took it, his hand shaking slightly. He loaded it with the deep blue and dragged it across the canvas in a violent arc. Then another. The colors started bleeding together, destroying his careful grid. Gray and black and blue mixing into something murky and dark. He wanted to tell me something, Marcus said, painting faster. The text said he had exciting news. I never found out what it was. That must be hard. Hard, Marcus laughed, but it came out wrong. He's dead, and I don't even know what the last important thing in his life was. I was too busy with buildings and money and things that don't matter at all. The canvas was covered now, layers of dark colors swirling together. Marcus's breathing was heavy, and he realized he'd been painting so hard his shoulder ached. He stepped back, staring at what he'd created. It looked like a storm, like drowning, like the inside of his head for the past 6 months. "That's enough for today," Elena said quietly. Marcus set down the brush, suddenly exhausted. His hands were covered in paint, and he'd somehow gotten it on his white shirt cuffs. "I don't see how this helps." "You just talked more about your grief in 20 minutes than you probably have in 3 months of traditional therapy," Elena pointed out. "That seems like progress." He looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. She had paint in her hair too, he noticed. Fresh paint, which meant she'd been working while he destroyed that canvas. "What were you painting?" Elena smiled and turned her easel slightly. It was a landscape, soft yellows and oranges blending into pink. A sunset or sunrise, peaceful and warm. The complete opposite of his storm. "Balance," she said simply. "You brought heavy energy into the space. I painted light to balance it out. That's part of my job." "That's actually your job." Managing energy in a room, among other things. She started cleaning brushes in a jar of murky water. "But yes, I believe the art we create both reflects and affects our emotional state. You needed to externalize some darkness tonight. Next time, we'll see what else wants to come out." Marcus washed his hands in the large utility sink against the wall, watching black and gray and blue swirl down the drain. "Next time. Tuesday at 7, unless that doesn't work." Elena was covering paint tubes now, tidying the workspace with efficient movements. "No, it works." He dried his hands on a paint-stained towel. "How much do I owe you, Doctor?" "Richardson and I have a referral arrangement. She handles the billing." Elena walked him toward the door. "Marcus, that painting you made tonight, you should leave it here. Let it live in this space for a while." He glanced back at the canvas on the easel, still wet and dark and chaotic. "Why?" "Because you don't need to carry it home with you. That's the point." Marcus stepped out into the night air, feeling strangely lighter despite the emotional exhaustion. His driver pulled up within 2 minutes of his call, and as they drove back toward his penthouse, he found himself thinking not about the painting he'd made, but about the sunrise Elena had created to balance his storm. The next Tuesday, Marcus arrived 10 minutes early. He told himself it was because traffic had been lighter than expected, not because he'd left his office 20 minutes earlier than necessary. Elena was already there, arranging supplies. She wore jeans again, this time with a dark green sweater that had paint stains on the sleeves. Her hair was down tonight, falling in waves past her shoulders. "You came back," she said, sounding genuinely pleased. "I said I would. People say a lot of things. Showing up is different." She gestured to the same easel as last time. His dark painting sat against the wall now, dry and somehow less menacing than he remembered. "Want to continue that one or start fresh?" Marcus looked at the storm he'd created. Fresh. Good instinct. Elena handed him a new canvas. "Tonight, I want to try something different. We're going to work with color theory and emotions." She laid out a color wheel and various tubes of paint. Different colors evoke different feelings. Blue is often sadness or calm. Red is anger or passion. Yellow is joy or anxiety. But those are just guidelines. Your associations might be completely different. "This sounds like art school," Marcus said, but he was listening. "Art school wishes it was this practical." Elena smiled. "Pick a memory of your brother. Not the accident, something from before, something good." Marcus's first instinct was to say he couldn't, that accessing those memories hurt too much. But Elena waited patiently, mixing something on her own palette, and the space felt safe somehow. "We used to go fishing," he said finally. "Our dad took us when we were kids. After he died, Daniel and I would go every summer, just the two of us. We'd rent a cabin upstate, spend a week on the lake. What colors do you associate with that memory?" Marcus studied the paint tubes. He picked up green, then blue but lighter than last time, brown, yellow. His hand hesitated over orange, then grabbed it. "Good. Now paint that memory. Not literally, not a picture of a lake. Paint how it felt." This time, Marcus didn't hesitate as much. He started with the blue, lighter and more transparent than before, creating something that felt open rather than oppressive. He added green in loose strokes, letting the colors overlap. The brown became something grounding at the bottom of the canvas, yellow in small bursts, like light through trees. "He was the better fisherman," Marcus said, painting as he talked. "I always got impatient, but Daniel could sit still for hours. He said it was meditation, not fishing. Sounds like he was wise. He was. Younger than me by 4 years, but sometimes it felt like he was the older brother." Marcus added the orange carefully, small touches that warmed the composition. He worked in urban planning, city projects, affordable housing initiatives. Said he wanted to make people's lives better, not just make money. "And you felt guilty about that?" The question stopped Marcus mid-brushstroke. "What? The way you said it, like there was judgment there." Elena was working on her own canvas again, creating something with swirls of purple and teal. "No, I was proud of him." But even as Marcus said it, he heard the defensiveness in his voice. "I built my company from nothing. My real estate developments bring jobs, economic growth. I'm sure they do." But you still heard judgment in his choices, real or imagined. Marcus set down his brush. "He did judge me sometimes. Not meanly, but he thought I was too focused on money, on success. He wanted me to do more meaningful work. And that made you angry?" "No, yes, I don't know." Marcus picked up the brush again, adding darker blue streaks to his painting now. "I loved my work. I was good at it. But every time Daniel talked about his projects, these housing developments for low-income families or community centers in rough neighborhoods, I felt like I was the shallow one." "Did you ever tell him that?" "Of course not." "Why not?" Marcus's hand tightened on the brush. "Because he was doing good things, important things." "What right did I have to feel defensive about that?" "The right of someone whose own work was being implicitly devalued by someone they loved," Elena said simply. "Relationships are complicated. We can love people and still have conflicts with them. That doesn't end just because they die." The painting in front of Marcus had changed. What started as a peaceful lake scene had become more turbulent. The colors still blended together, but there was tension in the brushstrokes now. "I miss him," Marcus said quietly. "But I'm also angry at him, which makes no sense because he's dead. You can't be angry at dead people." "You absolutely can. Grief isn't just sadness. It's every complicated feeling we had about a person, all hitting us at once without the chance for resolution." Marcus stared at his painting. It wasn't finished, but it was honest. "This is harder than I expected." "The art or the feelings?" "Both." Elena cleaned her brush and walked over to look at his canvas. She stood beside him, close enough that he caught the scent of paint and something floral, maybe her shampoo. "This is beautiful," she said. "See how the colors interact. The tension between the peaceful elements and the disruption. That's honest work, Marcus." He turned to look at her, and she met his eyes directly. There was no pity there, no clinical distance. Just warmth and understanding. "Thank you," he said and meant it. "Same time Thursday?" Elena asked. "I'll be here." Over the next few weeks, Marcus found himself thinking about Lighthouse Studio at odd times. During conference calls, he'd remember the smell of turpentine. During contract negotiations, he'd think about color theory and emotional honesty. His assistant noticed he was leaving the office earlier on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and that he came in Wednesday and Friday mornings looking more relaxed than he had in months. He also noticed he was thinking about Elena, the way she explained artistic concepts with such clear passion, how she always had dried paint somewhere on her body, the sound of her laugh when he made a rare joke, the way she worked on her own art while he worked on his, creating a comfortable parallel space rather than watching him like a subject. "Tell me about your family," Marcus said one Thursday evening. They were working with watercolors tonight, which Elena had explained were less controllable and therefore good for practicing letting go of perfectionism. Elena looked up from her painting, surprised. "We're here for your therapy, and talking helps. You said so yourself. I've been talking about Daniel for weeks now. Tell me something about you." She considered this, then smiled. "Okay, fair trade. I grew up in Santa Fe. My mom's a ceramics artist and my dad teaches high school art. I have two older sisters, both of whom did sensible things like becoming a lawyer and a doctor respectively. The rebel of the family, something like that. They couldn't understand why I'd get a master's in art therapy instead of just therapy or just art." Elena's brush moved across her paper in smooth, confident strokes. "But I loved both. The psychology of emotion and the physical act of creation, bringing them together made sense to me. How long have you had the studio?" 3 years. "Before that, I worked at a hospital doing art therapy with trauma patients. It was meaningful work, but institutional. I wanted to create a space that felt more open, less clinical." She gestured around the studio. "Thus, Lighthouse. Why Lighthouse? Because art is about illumination, finding light in darkness, guiding people home to themselves." Elena met his eyes. "And because I'm apparently very earnest about metaphors." Marcus laughed, a real laugh that surprised him. "It's a good metaphor. What about you? How did you end up in commercial real estate?" "My dad was a contractor. Worked on building sites his whole life. Died of a heart attack when I was 22, Daniel was 18. Marcus watched watercolor bloom across his paper, the colors spreading in ways he couldn't control. "He left us nothing but debt and half-finished projects. I dropped out of business school, took over his contracts and somehow didn't completely fail. Turned those projects into my first development deal. That must have been terrifying." "It was. Daniel wanted to help, but I insisted he stay in school, finish his degree, have the life Dad would have wanted for him." Marcus added more color to his painting, darker shades mixing with lighter ones. "I think I was trying to be the dad we didn't have anymore, protecting him, providing for him. And he resented that sometimes. Probably. He never said so directly, but he always wanted to be treated as an equal, not a younger brother to be protected." Marcus set down his brush. "The last few years, we'd grown apart. Different lives, different priorities. We still did the fishing trip every summer, but it felt more obligatory than before. I kept thinking we had time to fix it, to get back to how we used to be." Elena was quiet for a moment, then said, "One of the hardest parts of grief is mourning not just the person, but the relationship you didn't have yet. The reconciliations that won't happen, the growth that got cut short." "Yeah." Marcus's throat felt tight. "The exciting news he wanted to tell me at dinner. I finally contacted his girlfriend, asked if she knew what it was. He'd been accepted to a master's program in sustainable urban development. full scholarship to study in Copenhagen for 2 years. He was going to leave, and I would have been proud but also relieved in a way. Relieved that the pressure of being compared to him, of feeling like the selfish brother, would ease with distance. And now you feel guilty for that relief you almost felt. How do you do that? Know exactly what I'm thinking, Elena smiled sadly. Because grief is my language. I've been speaking it a long time. Marcus wanted to ask why, what loss had taught her this language, but Elena turned back to her painting. The moment for that question passed. His watercolor had become something abstract, layers of color bleeding into each other. It wasn't beautiful like Elena's work, but it was honest. He could see his emotions in it, the complicated mix of love and resentment and grief and guilt. I think I'm starting to understand what Dr. Richardson meant, Marcus said. About traditional therapy not working. What do you mean? Talking about feelings always felt self-indulgent, like I should just handle things and move on. But this, he gestured to the painting, it's not talking about it, it's doing something with it, making it external. Exactly. You're a doer, Marcus. You built an empire by taking action. Of course, passive conversation wasn't going to work for you. You needed active processing. They worked in comfortable silence for a while. Marcus had never been good with silence, always filling it with phone calls or emails or strategic planning. But here, with just the sound of brushes on paper and Elena's occasional humming, silence felt peaceful. "What are you working on?" he asked eventually. Elena tilted her canvas toward him. It was a garden scene, lush and colorful, with hidden details that revealed themselves the longer you looked. A butterfly here, a bird there, flowers in impossible colors. "It's for my mom's birthday. She collects my work." Elena studied it critically. Though this might be too whimsical for her taste, she prefers geometric ceramics. "It's beautiful. The detail is incredible." "Thank you. I like working on personal projects between sessions. Reminds me why I fell in love with art in the first place." Elena started cleaning her brushes. "Love languages, you know. My family doesn't always understand my career, but they love my art, so I paint them pieces that say what I have trouble saying out loud." Marcus thought about that as he cleaned his own workspace. Love languages. Active processing. The idea that there were multiple ways to communicate, to feel, to heal. It seemed obvious in retrospect, but months of forcing himself to sit in Dr. Richardson's office and articulate emotions had felt like speaking a foreign language badly. "Can I see the other paintings I've done?" he asked. "Of course. They're yours." Elena pulled out a portfolio from a storage cabinet. Inside were all his pieces from the past few weeks. The dark storm from the first night, the conflicted lake scene. Several abstract pieces from subsequent sessions. A surprisingly angry piece in red and black from the night he talked about missing his brother's funeral while he was sedated in the hospital with pneumonia, something he still hadn't forgiven himself for. Looking at them together, Marcus could see a progression. The colors were still mostly dark, but they were getting more varied, more complex. The compositions felt less chaotic, more intentional, even when they were painful. "I made all of these," he said, surprised. "You did. You're actually quite talented. Raw, but there's real emotional intelligence in your work." "I don't know about that." "I do. It's literally my job to know," Elena smiled. "Marcus, you've been coming here for 6 weeks now. How are you feeling generally, outside of these sessions?" He considered the question honestly. "Better. Not good, not healed or whatever, but I don't feel like I'm drowning anymore. More like treading water. That's significant progress. I'm sleeping more. Had dinner with friends last week, which I haven't done since the accident. My assistant says I'm less terrible to work for. Marcus looked at Elena. This is helping. You're helping. Something shifted in Elena's expression. A flicker of something that might have been pleasure at the compliment, or might have been something else. But she turned back to putting away his paintings before he could identify it. Good, I'm glad. On the drive home, Marcus realized he'd been looking forward to their sessions not just for the art therapy, but to see Elena. To talk to her, to hear her insights, to make her laugh. That seemed like dangerous territory, developing feelings for his therapist. Except she wasn't really his therapist, was she? She was an art instructor working with him on grief processing. That was different, probably. Maybe. He was still thinking about it when he walked into his building, nodded at the doorman, and rode the elevator to his penthouse. The space was immaculate as always, decorated by a professional in neutrals and expensive furniture. Nothing personal, nothing warm. It looked like a hotel suite, even though he'd lived here for 4 years. Marcus walked to his bedroom and opened the closet where he'd boxed up Daniel's belongings from his apartment. Their mother had died when they were young, so there was no one else to take these things. Marcus had packed everything carefully, telling himself he'd go through it later, when it hurt less. 6 months later, the boxes sat unopened. Tonight, he pulled one down and opened it. Inside were Daniel's clothes, his books on urban planning and sustainable development, his battered laptop. A framed photo of the two of them on their last fishing trip, both sunburned and holding up embarrassingly small fish. Marcus smiled despite the ache in his chest. At the bottom of the box was a sketchbook. He didn't know Daniel drew. He opened it carefully and found pages of sketches, building designs and city planning concepts, but also random things. A detailed drawing of a coffee cup. A portrait of a woman who must have been his girlfriend. A sketch of a lake that Marcus recognized as their fishing spot, with 2 figures in a boat rendered in just a few simple lines. On the last page with anything on it, Daniel had written, "For Marcus, when you're ready to remember that buildings are just spaces until people fill them with life. Love you, little big brother." Marcus closed the sketchbook carefully, his hands shaking. He pulled out his phone and took a photo of the message, then texted it to his assistant. "I want to start a foundation in Daniel's name. Affordable housing and community development grants. Let's discuss Monday." Then he texted Elena, even though it was past 11. "Thank you for tonight. I went through some of my brother's things for the first time, found something important." She responded almost immediately. "That's brave. How are you feeling?" "Sad but good. Is that possible?" "Absolutely. Grief and gratitude can exist together. Sleep well, Marcus." He stared at the text exchange, then added, "You too, Elena." That night, he slept 7 hours straight for the first time since the accident. The following Tuesday, Marcus arrived with coffee. He'd stopped at Elena's favorite cafe, which he knew because he'd seen her carrying their distinctive cups several times. The fact that he'd made a mental note of that probably said something about his growing feelings, but he was choosing not to examine that too closely yet. "You didn't have to do this," Elena said, but she took the cup with a smile. "Though I'm not going to pretend I don't appreciate it. How did you know I like oat milk lattes? I pay attention." Something flickered in her eyes again, that same something from before. "I saw your email to Dr. Richardson. You're starting a foundation." Marcus set up his canvas. Tonight felt different. He felt different. "The Daniel Ashford Foundation for Community Development will provide grants for affordable housing projects, community centers, urban renewal in underserved areas." all the things he cared about. That's wonderful, Marcus, really wonderful. It's not just charity or guilt, he said carefully. I've been thinking about what you said about my work. I built things that made money, but I could build things that make money and matter. Developments don't have to be just luxury condos. They can be mixed use, mixed income, genuinely beneficial to communities. And you're okay with the reduced profit margins that probably involves, Marcus laughed. I'm a millionaire many times over. I think I can afford to make less money if it means doing something meaningful, something Daniel would have respected. Something you can respect, Elena corrected gently. This isn't just about earning your brother's approval posthumously. This is about aligning your work with your values. When did I become someone with values beyond profit margins? You always were. You just forgot for a while. Elena handed him a palette with brighter colors than usual. Tonight, I want you to paint something hopeful, future-facing instead of past-dwelling. Marcus looked at the yellows, oranges, bright greens, and blues she'd selected. I don't know if I'm there yet. Try. You don't have to be fully healed to imagine healing. He started with yellow, tentative at first. It felt foreign after weeks of darker colors. But as he worked, adding orange and light green, the composition started to feel like sunrise, like beginning rather than ending. My sister called yesterday, Elena said, working on her own canvas. The lawyer, she's getting divorced. Marcus looked up. I'm sorry. Don't be. Her husband was awful, controlling, dismissive. But she stayed because divorce felt like failure to her. Elena's brush moved in sharp, angry strokes. I wanted to tell her it was about time, but you can't say that. You have to be supportive and sympathetic. But you're angry for her. Furious. She wasted 10 years on someone who made her small. Elena sighed. Sorry, I shouldn't be talking about my problems during your session. Why not? I told you weeks ago talking helps. And you've been holding space for my grief for 6 weeks. Fair is fair. Elena smiled, but it was strained. I'm supposed to be the therapist here. Art instructor, Marcus corrected. That's what you said, and friends talk to each other about their lives. Is that what we are, friends? The question hung in the air between them. Marcus set down his brush. I'd like to be, he said carefully, if that's appropriate given our professional relationship. It's probably not, Elena admitted, but I'd like to be friends too. They worked in silence for a while, but it felt charged now, heavy with things unsaid. Marcus's painting had evolved into something optimistic, all sunrise colors and upward movement. Elena's was angrier, slashing reds and blacks, the opposite of her usual style. Why art therapy? Marcus asked. You mentioned you worked with trauma patients before, but not why you chose that specialty. Elena was quiet long enough that Marcus thought she wouldn't answer. Then she set down her brush. My younger brother died when I was 25. He was 21. Suicide. Her voice was steady but soft. He'd been depressed for years, in and out of treatment. Talk therapy, medication, hospitalization. Nothing seemed to reach him. 2 weeks before he died, I took him to a paint-your-own pottery place, just something to do together. He made a bowl and seemed happy for the first time in months, really engaged, really present. I'm so sorry, Elena. He left me the bowl in his note. Said those 2 hours making something with his hands had been the most peaceful he'd felt in years, and he was sorry he couldn't find more of that feeling. Elena's eyes were wet, but she didn't cry. I went back to school for art therapy the next semester. If creating something could give him even 2 hours of peace, maybe it could give other people more. Maybe it could be part of healing in a way words alone weren't. Marcus crossed the space between them without thinking and pulled her into a hug. Elena stiffened for a second, then relaxed into it, her face pressed against his shoulder. "His name was Miguel," she said, muffled against his shirt, "and I loved him so much." "I know. I know you did." They stood like that for a long moment. When Elena finally pulled back, she wiped her eyes and laughed shakily. "So much for professional boundaries. We agreed we're friends." "Friends hug. Friends hug," Elena repeated. She looked at him, really looked at him, and Marcus felt the air change between them. This wasn't just friendship, and they both knew it. But Elena stepped back, putting physical distance between them. "We should finish up. It's getting late." Marcus wanted to push, to ask what she was feeling, but he respected her boundaries. "Okay." They cleaned up in careful silence. The easy comfort from earlier replaced by awareness and tension. When Marcus left that night, Elena walked him to the door like always, but neither of them quite met the other's eyes. In his car, Marcus leaned his head back against the seat. He was falling for his art instructor, who was helping him process his brother's death while processing her own brother's death. And the timing was terrible, and it probably violated multiple professional ethics. And he didn't care because Elena Torres was the first person in years who made him want to feel things instead of building walls against feeling. He pulled out his phone and texted her. "Thank you for sharing about Miguel. I'm honored you trusted me with that." Her response came as he was pulling into his building's garage. "Thank you for listening. Same time Thursday. I'll be there." But Thursday, Elena wasn't there. Marcus arrived to find a note on the studio door. "Family emergency, sessions canceled this week. Sorry for the inconvenience. Elena." He stood staring at the note, worry immediate and intense. He pulled out his phone and called her. It went to voicemail. "Hey, it's Marcus. I saw your note. I hope everything's okay. Call if you need anything." She didn't call back. Friday morning, Marcus couldn't concentrate on work. His assistant brought him contracts to review, and he read the same paragraph 5 times without retaining anything. "Mr. Ashford, is everything all right?" she finally asked. "Do you have Elena Torres's home address? From the billing information." "Sir, I'm not sure it's appropriate to show up at her house uninvited. She had a family emergency. I want to make sure she's okay." His assistant gave him a look that clearly said she knew exactly why he wanted to check on Elena, and it wasn't purely concern for a service provider. But she pulled up the information. Elena lived in a converted loft above a bookstore in the Arts District. Marcus had his driver take him there after work, carrying flowers because showing up empty-handed felt wrong, then worrying the flowers were too much, then deciding he didn't care. He climbed the stairs to her unit and knocked. No answer. He knocked again. "Elena, it's Marcus. I'm worried about you." The door opened a crack and Elena peered out. She looked exhausted, her eyes red from crying. "This isn't a good time," she said. "What happened?" "Marcus, please, I can't do this right now." "Can't do what?" "Let a friend be concerned about you," Elena laughed, but it was bitter. "We're not friends. You're my client, and I crossed professional boundaries. And now my sister is in my apartment crying because her divorce got ugly, and I can't handle both things at once." From inside the apartment, a woman's voice called, "Elena, who is it?" "No one, I'll be right there." Elena looked at Marcus. "I'm sorry, I need to be here for my sister right now." "I understand. But Elena, we are friends, and whatever you're worried about crossing boundaries, we'll figure it out. But don't shut me out because you're scared." "How do you know I'm scared?" "Because I am too." And I recognize the look. Elena's expression softened. "I can't talk about this now." "Okay, but I'll be at the studio Tuesday at 7, whether you reschedule the session or not. Because I want to see you as a friend or whatever else we might be." Marcus, Tuesday at 7, he repeated, then handed her the flowers. For your sister, I hope things get better. He walked away before she could respond, his heart pounding. That was either the bravest or stupidest thing he'd done in years, and he wouldn't know which until Tuesday. The weekend crawled by. Marcus threw himself into foundation planning, working with his legal team to structure the organization properly. He toured one of his older developments, a luxury condo building, and thought about what Daniel would say about the space. Probably something about wasted potential, about how the same square footage could house 3 times as many people if the units were smaller and more affordable. Monday, he met with his executive team and announced a new company direction. They would still do some luxury developments, but 50% of new projects would be mixed income or affordable housing, often in partnership with the foundation. The profit margins will be lower, his CFO pointed out. I'm aware. Do it anyway. This is because of your brother, isn't it? His longest-standing partner asked, not unkindly. Yes. And because it's the right thing to do, and because I want to build things that matter, not just things that make money. Marcus looked around the table. Anyone who has a problem with that direction is welcome to exit with a generous severance package. But this is where the company is going. No one took him up on the offer. Tuesday evening, Marcus arrived at Lighthouse Studio at exactly 7. The lights were on. Elena's car was parked outside. He took a deep breath and went in. Elena was waiting, sitting on one of the stools by the main supply table. She stood when he entered. You came, she said. I said I would. I wasn't sure if you meant it or if it was just something people say. Marcus moved closer. I always mean what I say to you. Elena twisted her hands together, nervous in a way he'd never seen her. My sister left this morning. She's staying with my parents for a while until she figures things out. That's good. Family support helps. Marcus, I've been thinking about us all weekend. And this is complicated. You came to me for grief therapy. There's a power dynamic there, an ethical consideration. You said yourself you're not my therapist. You're an art instructor. That feels like a technicality. Maybe, or maybe it's just true. Marcus took another step closer. Elena, I came here 6 weeks ago because my therapist made me. I was going through the motions of living without actually feeling anything. You taught me how to feel again, not just about Daniel's death, but about everything. Hope, possibility, connection. He paused. I'm falling for you. I think I have been since the first night when you had blue paint on your face and told me to trust my instincts. Elena's eyes were bright. I'm falling for you too. And it terrifies me because I know what loss feels like, and I know that letting myself care means risking that pain again. It does, but the alternative is what I was doing before I met you. Shutting down, building walls, going numb, that's not living. No, it's not. Elena closed the distance between them. I think we should stop the art therapy sessions. Marcus's heart sank. Oh. Because I can't be your instructor and your girlfriend at the same time. That actually would be an ethical violation. She smiled, tentative and hopeful. But if you wanted to come here as my boyfriend to paint alongside me while we both work on our own stuff, that would be different. Your boyfriend, if you want to be. No pressure if that's moving too fast. Marcus cupped her face in his hands, feeling the softness of her skin, seeing his own hope reflected in her eyes. I absolutely want to be. He kissed her, gentle at first, then deeper when she responded. She tasted like coffee and chapstick, and her hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Elena laughed. I've wanted to do that for weeks. Me too. though I kept telling myself it was inappropriate. It was. But you're not my client anymore, so now it's just two people who like each other. Elena took his hand. Want to paint something together, like an actual collaboration. I don't know if I'm good enough to collaborate with you. Stop that. Your work is good, raw and emotional and honest, which is better than technically perfect and soulless. They set up a large canvas on the main easel, bigger than anything Marcus had worked on before. Elena selected colors, explaining her choices, and Marcus added his own. They worked side by side, sometimes painting in silence, sometimes talking about everything and nothing. Elena told him about growing up in Santa Fe, about her complicated relationship with her sisters, about Miguel and the bowl she still kept on her nightstand. Marcus told her about building his company, about the pressure he'd put on himself to be successful enough for both him and Daniel, about the guilt of surviving when his brother didn't. "Do you believe in fate?" Elena asked, adding purple to a section Marcus had painted blue, the colors mixing into something neither had created alone. "I never did before. But now, I think maybe we meet the people we need when we need them. I needed someone to teach me how to feel again." "You needed someone who understood loss and was trying to figure out how to live with it." Elena leaned against his shoulder, and Marcus wrapped an arm around her waist, both of them studying their collaborative painting. "What is this supposed to be?" he asked. "I have no idea." "Abstract emotional processing." "That sounds appropriately artistic." She laughed and kissed his cheek. "Want to get dinner after this, like an actual date?" "I would love that." They painted for another hour, then cleaned up together. Marcus had never thought about how intimate cleaning could be, washing brushes side by side, putting away supplies, turning off lights. Every small action felt significant when done together. Dinner was at a small Italian place Elena loved, tucked into a neighborhood Marcus rarely visited. They sat at a corner table, and he learned she was vegetarian, loved terrible reality TV shows, and had strong opinions about the Oxford comma. "This is important information," Marcus said, making a show of taking mental notes. "Vegetarian, reality TV, pro-Oxford comma. Are those deal breakers?" "I'm also pro-Oxford comma, so at least we have that." Elena laughed, the sound bright and genuine. "What about you? What are your terrible habits I should know about?" "I'm a workaholic, but I'm working on that. I have strong opinions about coffee that border on snobbery, and I alphabetize my books." "Monster. What about movies? Are you one of those people who only watches documentaries?" "Documentaries and superhero movies. Interesting combination." "What can I say? I contain multitudes." They talked until the restaurant staff started stacking chairs around them, clearly wanting to close. Marcus paid the bill and they walked out into the cool evening air. "Can I drive you home?" Marcus asked. "I drove here." "Then can I follow you home to make sure you get there safely?" Elena smiled. "That's very gentlemanly of you. I'm trying to make a good impression." "You already have." Marcus followed her car back to her loft, then walked her to her door like they were in a 1950s movie. But when they reached her door, Elena turned to him with decidedly modern intentions. "Want to come in?" "Are you sure?" "Marcus, we're both adults who are into each other, I'm sure." Her loft was exactly what he'd expected. Art everywhere, in various stages of completion. Bookshelves overflowing with volumes on psychology and art theory. A cozy couch covered in colorful pillows. And on her nightstand, visible through the open bedroom door, a simple ceramic bowl. "That's Miguel's bowl," Marcus said. "Yes, I keep it where I can see it every morning." A reminder of why I do what I do. Elena moved closer to him. Is it weird that I have my dead brother's pottery in my bedroom? No, I have Daniel's sketchbook in my nightstand drawer. We're quite a pair, aren't we? I think we're perfect. He kissed her again, slower this time, savoring it. Elena's hand slid up his chest, and he pulled her closer, feeling the warmth of her body against his. When they finally broke apart, she took his hand and led him to the couch. They spent hours talking, kissing, learning each other. Marcus felt like a teenager again, making out on a couch in no rush to push for more. This felt too important to rush. I should go, he said eventually, though he made no move to leave. You should, Elena agreed, but she kissed him again. Finally, reluctantly, Marcus stood. Dinner tomorrow. I have a session with another client. Thursday. Perfect. My place this time, I'll cook. You cook? Don't sound so surprised, I'm full of hidden talents. Elena walked him to the door, and he kissed her one more time before leaving. In his car, Marcus felt lighter than he had in months. Maybe years. This thing with Elena felt right in a way nothing had felt right since before Daniel died. The next few weeks fell into a pattern. Marcus worked on the foundation during the day, pushing forward affordable housing projects and community development grants. Elena ran her art studio, working with trauma patients and grief groups. They saw each other for dinner several times a week, and Marcus came to the studio on Tuesday and Thursday evenings, not for therapy anymore, but just to create art alongside her. He'd never been happier. You're different, his assistant observed one morning, bringing him coffee. Lighter. I'm working on work-life balance. Is her name Elena Torres? Marcus looked up sharply. How did you know? Boss, you've cleared your Tuesday and Thursday evenings for 2 months and you smile at your phone now. I'm not an idiot. She set down his coffee. I'm glad you're happy. You deserve it. Thank you. That means a lot. His executive team noticed too. His partner pulled him aside after a meeting. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. You're sharp but not stressed. Focused but not obsessed. This is the best version of you I've seen in years. Marcus took Elena to meet his friends, the ones he'd been neglecting. They loved her immediately, especially when she told embarrassing stories about some of Marcus's early artistic attempts. He painted a storm that looked like it was going to consume the world, Elena said, laughing. All blacks and grays and dark blues, very dramatic. That tracks, his college roommate said. Marcus has always been dramatic about his feelings while pretending he doesn't have feelings. I'm right here, Marcus protested. We know, that's what makes it fun. But his friend smiled. It's good to see you happy, man. Really good. Elena introduced Marcus to her art therapy community, and he found himself fascinated by the work they did. Artists working with veterans, with abuse survivors, with people processing all kinds of trauma. He started thinking about how the foundation could support art therapy programs in the communities they were developing. You don't have to make this your whole identity, Elena said one night. They were in his penthouse, cooking dinner together. The foundation is wonderful, but you can't turn your grief into a full-time crusade. I'm not. I'm building something meaningful. There's a difference. Is there? Because I see you working 12-hour days just like you did before, except now it's foundation work instead of profit-driven development. Marcus set down the knife he'd been using to chop vegetables. Are you saying the foundation is a bad idea? Not at all. I'm saying balance matters. You learned how to feel again, but you're channeling all those feelings into work. What about just living? Experiencing joy for its own sake, not as part of some larger mission. This is rich coming from someone who turned her brother's suicide into a career. Elena flinched, and Marcus immediately regretted his words. "I'm sorry, that was cruel, but not entirely wrong." Elena turned off the stove. "I did turn my grief into my life's work, and maybe that's not the healthiest thing either." They stood in Marcus's pristine kitchen, facing each other across uncomfortable truths. "We're both using work to avoid fully processing our losses," Marcus said finally. "Yeah, we are." "So what do we do about that?" Elena moved closer, taking his hands. "We keep doing what we're doing, creating art, building the foundation, but we also make time for life, for each other. For experiences that aren't about grief or healing or mission, just about being happy. I can do that. Good. Because I have tickets to a terrible reality TV marathon viewing party next week, and you're coming with me." "That sounds awful." "It will be. But it will also be fun, and silly, and completely pointless, which is exactly what we both need sometimes." Marcus pulled her into a hug, breathing in the familiar scent of her. "How did you get so wise?" "Lots of therapy and several expensive degrees." They laughed, and the tension broke. Dinner was delicious, and afterward they watched a movie that neither of them paid much attention to because they were too busy kissing on the couch. "Stay tonight," Marcus said. They'd been dating for 2 months now, taking things slow, but he wanted her here, wanted to wake up next to her. "Okay," Elena said simply. That night, they made love for the first time, slow and tender and intense. Afterward, lying tangled together in Marcus's bed, Elena traced patterns on his chest. "I love you," she said quietly. Marcus's heart stuttered. "I love you too." "That's terrifying to say out loud." "I know, but it's true." Elena propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him. "We're really doing this, aren't we? Building a relationship on top of our respective grief processes." "I think we're building a relationship alongside our grief processes. The grief doesn't go away, but we're learning to live with it together." "Together, I like that word." "Me too." They fell asleep wrapped around each other. And for the first time since Daniel died, Marcus didn't dream about the accident. Instead, he dreamed about a house filled with art and laughter, about a future that felt possible again. The foundation officially launched 3 months after Marcus and Elena started dating. They held a gala at one of Marcus's hotel properties, with all proceeds going to the first round of grant distributions. Elena helped him design the event, incorporating art installations from local artists, including several pieces created by her art therapy groups. Marcus gave a speech about Daniel, about loss, about channeling grief into positive change. His voice cracked twice, but Elena stood in the front row, her pride and support visible, and that gave him strength to continue. "My brother believed buildings were meant to serve communities, not the other way around. He believed everyone deserved safe, beautiful, affordable places to live. And he believed that creating those spaces was about more than architecture. It was about hope." Marcus looked out at the crowd of investors, politicians, and community leaders. The Daniel Ashford Foundation will honor that belief by supporting projects that prioritize people over profit, community over capitalism, and long-term positive impact over short-term gains. "Thank you all for being here to support this mission." The applause was thunderous. Several people approached him afterward with ideas for projects, with offers of partnership, with their own stories of loss and finding meaning afterward. It was overwhelming and exhausting and wonderful. "You did it," Elena said when they finally escaped to a quiet corner. "Daniel would be so proud." "I hope so. I know so." "Marcus, what you're building here, it's beautiful, truly beautiful." He kissed her, not caring who saw. I couldn't have done this without you. You absolutely could have. But I'm glad you didn't have to. 6 months into their relationship, Elena asked Marcus to meet her parents. They flew to Santa Fe for a long weekend, and Marcus was nervous in a way he hadn't been since presenting his first major development deal. They're going to love you, Elena assured him. What if they think I'm too old for you? Marcus was 36 to Elena's 31, not a huge gap but enough to worry about. They won't. And even if they did, I'm an adult who makes her own decisions. Her parents were warm and welcoming, her father quieter, her mother exuberant. Their home was filled with art, every surface covered in ceramics or paintings or sculptures. Over dinner, they asked Marcus about his work, about the foundation, about his intentions toward their daughter. I love Elena, Marcus said simply. She helped me find my way back to living after my brother died, and I want to spend the rest of my life making sure she knows how extraordinary she is. Elena's mother beamed. Her father nodded approvingly. Miguel would have liked you, Elena's mother said. He had good instincts about people. That night, Elena showed Marcus her childhood bedroom, preserved mostly as it had been when she left for college. Art supplies everywhere, posters of famous paintings, a bulletin board covered in photos of her and Miguel. You were close, Marcus observed. We were. Losing him broke something in me that I don't think will ever be fully repaired. But being with you has shown me that broken things can still function, can still create beauty. Marcus pulled her close. You've shown me the same thing. They stayed in Santa Fe for 3 days, hiking in the mountains, visiting galleries, eating incredible food. Marcus bought Elena's mother a piece from a local ceramics artist, and her father a book on innovative urban planning that made the older man's eyes light up. On the flight home, Elena leaned against Marcus's shoulder. That went well, she said. It did. Your parents are wonderful. They really liked you. My mom texted me 17 times yesterday about how handsome and successful and kind you are. Only 17. I'm disappointed, Elena laughed. She was restraining herself. Back in the city, they fell into their rhythm again. Work, art, time together. Marcus's foundation awarded its first grants, funding 3 affordable housing projects and 2 community arts centers. Elena expanded her studio, bringing on another instructor to handle more sessions. They talked about moving in together. My place or yours? Elena asked one lazy Sunday morning, tangled in Marcus's sheets. Honestly, neither. My place is too corporate and your loft is too small. So we find somewhere new, something that's ours. I'd like that. They spent weeks looking at properties, and Marcus learned that Elena had very specific opinions about natural light and wall space for hanging art. Finally, they found a townhouse in a neighborhood between their individual places, with huge windows, exposed brick, and enough room for both a home office and an art studio. This is it, Elena said, standing in the empty living room, already visualizing where furniture would go. This is it, Marcus agreed. They moved in together 8 months after their first date, and the process of combining their lives was chaotic and wonderful. Marcus's minimalist furniture mixed with Elena's colorful chaos. His alphabetized books shared shelves with her art supplies. Miguel's bowl found a place on the mantel next to a framed photo of Daniel. We're really doing this, Elena said the first night in their new home, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes. We really are. I'm happy. Like genuinely, deeply happy. And that feels weird because I spent so long being sad. Marcus understood completely. Happiness feels like betrayal sometimes, like by being happy we're forgetting them. but we're not. No, we're not. We're living the kind of full lives they didn't get to have, and I think they'd want that for us. They ordered pizza and unpacked until midnight, then made love in their new bedroom, christening the space as theirs. A year after they started dating, Marcus took Elena back to Lighthouse Studio. He'd been working on a painting in secret, coming to the studio early before Elena arrived for her sessions. "Why are we here?" Elena asked when he led her inside. "I want to show you something." He uncovered the canvas he'd been working on. It was a landscape, the fishing lake he and Daniel used to visit, but it wasn't just the two of them in the boat anymore. There were 4 figures now, rendered in simple lines but recognizable. Marcus, Daniel, Elena, and Miguel. All of them together on the water, under a sky that was neither sunrise nor sunset but somewhere in between. Elena stared at the painting, tears streaming down her face. "Marcus, this is beautiful." "It's not technically good. The perspective is off and the proportions are wrong." "It's perfect. It's absolutely perfect." She turned to him. "They would have liked each other, Daniel and Miguel." "I think so too. I think they would have understood each other." Elena kissed him, tasting like salt from her tears. "I love you so much. I love you too, and I have something else to show you." He pulled out a small box from his pocket and dropped to one knee. Elena's hands flew to her mouth. "Elena Torres, you taught me how to feel again. You showed me that loss doesn't have to mean the end of living, that grief and joy can coexist, that broken things can still create beauty. I want to spend the rest of my life creating that beauty with you. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Elena said, crying and laughing at the same time. "Yes, absolutely yes." He slid the ring onto her finger, a simple band with a blue stone that matched the paint she'd had on her face the first night they met. She pulled him up and kissed him, and they stood in the studio where everything had started, beginning the next chapter of their story. They married 6 months later in a small ceremony at her parents' house in Santa Fe, surrounded by art and family and friends. Elena wore a dress covered in hand-painted flowers. Marcus cried during his vows. They released 2 lanterns after sunset, one for Daniel and one for Miguel, and watched them drift into the night sky. "To absent friends," Elena said. "To absent friends," Marcus repeated, holding his wife's hand. Their honeymoon was 2 weeks in Italy, wandering through museums and eating incredible food and making love in beautiful hotels. They bought art supplies in Florence and spent an afternoon painting in the gardens, creating terrible tourist art that they loved anyway. When they returned home, real life awaited. The foundation was expanding, requiring more of Marcus's time. Elena had been offered a position teaching art therapy at the university. They talked about the future, about children, about how to honor their past while building toward what came next. "I want kids," Elena said one night. They were in their home studio, working on separate projects. "But I'm scared." "Scared of what?" "Of loving someone that much again, of the possibility of losing them." Marcus set down his brush. "We could lose anyone at any time. Car accidents, illness, random chance. But the alternative is never loving anyone to avoid the pain of potential loss. And that's not living." "When did you get so wise?" "I had a good teacher." Elena smiled. "Let's do it. Let's have a baby and be terrified together. Best plan I've ever heard." It took 8 months, but eventually Elena showed Marcus a positive pregnancy test, and they both cried happy tears in their bathroom. They told their families, and the joy was universal and overwhelming. The pregnancy was relatively easy. The though Elena complained about not being able to use certain art supplies because of the fumes. Marcus was hovering and overprotective, and Elena alternated between finding it endearing and wanting to murder him. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass," she said when he tried to carry groceries for her. "I know, but let me take care of you anyway." Their daughter was born on a spring morning, after 14 hours of labor that Marcus thought might actually kill him from stress. But then the doctor placed their baby in Elena's arms and nothing else mattered. "She's perfect," Elena whispered. "She's so small." That's generally how babies work. They named her Danielle Rose, honoring both of their brothers. Danny for short, because their daughter would write her own story, not just carry the weight of memory. Being parents was harder than either of them expected, and more wonderful than they could have imagined. Sleepless nights and constant worry, but also tiny fingers gripping theirs, first smiles, the smell of baby shampoo. Marcus cut back his hours at work, not wanting to miss these early months. Elena took a leave from teaching, focusing on Danny while still working on her own art when the baby slept. They navigated the chaos together, learning as they went. "We're doing okay," Elena said one night, both of them exhausted. Danny was finally asleep after hours of fussiness. "We're doing better than okay. We're doing great. I wish they could meet her." Daniel and Miguel. "Me too, but I think they'd be happy for us. Happy that we found each other, that we built this life." Elena leaned against him on the couch, and they sat in comfortable silence, listening to the baby monitor, feeling the weight of their happiness and their grief in equal measure. 2 years later, they had a son, Michael Daniel. Mikey was easier than Danny had been, a cheerful baby who slept through the night early and smiled constantly. Danny was fascinated by her baby brother, always wanting to help, to hold him, to show him her toys. Their house filled with noise and joy and mess. Art projects on every surface, children's books mixed in with Marcus's business volumes, toys scattered across floors that used to be immaculate. It was chaos, and Marcus loved every minute of it. The foundation thrived. They'd funded over 50 projects now, providing housing for thousands of families, creating community spaces that brought neighborhoods together. Marcus hired a full executive staff, stepping into a chairman role that let him focus on strategy without the daily grind. Elena published a book on art therapy for grief processing, dedicating it to Miguel and to Marcus. It became required reading in several graduate programs, and she was invited to speak at conferences around the country. She always came home to Marcus and the kids, grounding herself in the life they'd built. On the 5th anniversary of their first meeting, Marcus and Elena left the kids with her parents and went back to Lighthouse Studio. The space had changed, expanded, but the essence remained the same. They set up easels side by side, just like that first night when Marcus had been drowning in grief and Elena had taught him how to breathe again. "What should we paint?" Elena asked. "How about our future?" "That's very optimistic for you. I learned it from this amazing woman who taught me that loss doesn't have to define us." They painted together, creating something abstract and colorful and hopeful. Blues and greens mixing with yellows and oranges, dark tones balanced by light ones. It was messy and imperfect and honest, just like their life. When they finished, Marcus pulled Elena close, kissing the top of her head. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For seeing me when I was lost, for teaching me how to feel again, for building this life with me. You did the same for me. I was hiding in my work, avoiding the risk of loving someone because I was scared of losing them. You showed me that love is worth the risk." They stood in the studio, surrounded by art and memories, holding each other as the evening light filtered through the windows. Outside, the city hummed with life. At home, their children slept peacefully, watched over by grandparents who loved them fiercely. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new joys, new moments to navigate. But tonight, in this space where grief had first transformed into healing, Marcus and Elena were simply present. Two people who had found each other in the darkness and chosen to walk toward the light together. Two people who had learned that endings and beginnings could coexist, that remembering the dead didn't mean stopping living, that broken hearts could mend into something even stronger than before. "I love you," Marcus said. "I love you too," Elena replied. And in that moment, surrounded by paint and possibility, that was enough. That was everything. Years continued to unfold with their particular rhythm. Danny started school, showing an early aptitude for math that surprised Elena and delighted Marcus. Mikey was more artistic, always drawing or building with blocks, creating elaborate structures he insisted were buildings like Daddy makes. They adopted a dog, a rescue mutt named Picasso who chewed through several pairs of expensive shoes before settling down. The foundation expanded internationally, partnering with organizations in developing countries to create sustainable housing solutions. Marcus traveled occasionally for work, but never for more than a few days. He'd learned his lesson about what mattered, about being present for the people he loved. Elena's studio became a cornerstone of the community's healing infrastructure. She trained other art therapists, created programs for schools and hospitals, and continued her own practice. But she always reserved Tuesday and Thursday evenings for private sessions, honoring the schedule that had brought Marcus into her life. They had hard days, of course. Days when grief resurged unexpectedly, when Marcus would find himself crying over a memory of Daniel, when Elena would hold Miguel's bowl and wish her brother could have met her children. But they had learned to make space for that grief, to let it exist alongside their happiness rather than fighting it. On Danny's 7th birthday, they started a new tradition. Every year on the kids' birthdays, they would light candles for Daniel and Miguel, telling stories about their uncles, keeping their memories alive for the next generation. "Uncle Daniel would have taught you how to fish," Marcus told Danny, who listened with wide, serious eyes. "And Uncle Miguel would have made you the best pottery," Elena told Mikey, who immediately wanted to try making a bowl. The children grew up knowing they were named for people who had been deeply loved, that their parents carried loss, but chose joy anyway. It was a powerful legacy, teaching them resilience and compassion in equal measure. When Danny was 10 and Mikey was 8, the family took a trip to the fishing lake Marcus, and Daniel used to visit. They rented a cabin, spent a week swimming and hiking and roasting marshmallows. Marcus taught both kids to fish, channeling Daniel's patience and wisdom. "Dad, why are you crying?" Danny asked when she caught her first fish, a tiny thing they threw back immediately. "Happy tears," Marcus said, pulling her into a hug. "Uncle Daniel would have been so proud of you." That night, after the kids were asleep, Marcus and Elena sat on the cabin's porch, watching stars reflect on the lake. "We did it," Elena said softly. "Did what?" "Built a life worth living. Despite everything, because of everything, we created something beautiful." Marcus took her hand, worn now from years of painting and parenting, still the most beautiful hand he'd ever held. "We did. And we're not done yet." They sat in comfortable silence, two people who had started as therapist and client, become friends, then lovers, then partners in every sense. Two people who had taken their grief and transformed it. not by forgetting or moving on, but by integrating loss into a larger story of love and resilience. The foundation continued to grow, eventually becoming one of the leading organizations in affordable housing development. Marcus's company fully transitioned to sustainable, community-focused projects. He won awards, gave speeches, but nothing meant as much to him as coming home to Elena and the kids, to the life they'd built together. Elena's work in art therapy influenced policy changes in mental health treatment. Her research on creative expression as healing was published in major journals. She trained hundreds of therapists who went on to help thousands of patients. But nothing meant as much to her as those Tuesday and Thursday evenings when she still made time for private clients, honoring the work that had brought her Marcus. They grew older together, gracefully and gratefully. Gray hair and laugh lines, bodies that softened and ached in new ways. Danny went to college, studying engineering. Mikey pursued architecture, wanting to follow in his father's footsteps, but with his mother's artistic sensibility. The empty nest was an adjustment, but it also brought new freedom. Marcus and Elena traveled more, revisiting Italy and exploring new places. They bought a small cabin near the fishing lake, spending summers there. They became grandparents when Danny had twins, a boy and a girl who filled their lives with new joy and purpose. Through it all, they painted. Sometimes together, sometimes separately, but always with the understanding that art was how they processed the world. Their home remained filled with canvases in various stages of completion, supplies scattered across every flat surface, beauty in constant creation. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a party. Friends and family filled their house, sharing stories and laughter. The walls displayed art from throughout their relationship, a visual chronicle of their life together. "Speech," someone called out. Marcus pulled Elena close, looking out at the gathered crowd of people they loved. 25 years ago, I was lost," he began. "My brother had died, and I had forgotten how to feel anything but pain. Dr. Richardson sent me to art therapy, and I met this incredible woman who taught me that grief didn't have to be the end of my story, that I could honor what I'd lost while still choosing to live fully." He turned to Elena. "You saved me, not by fixing me, but by showing me how to fix myself. By giving me tools to process pain, to create meaning from loss, to believe in the possibility of happiness again. Everything good in my life stems from walking into Lighthouse Studio that first night and meeting you." Elena was crying now, happy tears streaming down her face. "My turn," she said, taking his hands. "Marcus, you taught me that it's okay to risk love even when you know loss is possible. That building a life with someone, creating a family, opening your heart fully, that's not naive or dangerous. It's the bravest thing we can do. You gave me courage when I was hiding behind my work, scared to let anyone get too close." She looked around at their children, their grandchildren, the community they'd built. "We took our grief and made this beautiful, messy, wonderful life, and I would choose you again, every single time." They kissed as their family and friends applauded, and in that moment, surrounded by love and art and memory, Marcus felt complete. Not because the grief was gone, it would never be fully gone, but because he'd learned to carry it while still choosing joy, still embracing life, still creating beauty from brokenness. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and they were cleaning up together, Elena found Marcus standing in their home studio. He was looking at the painting of the lake, the one with 4 figures in a boat, now weathered and faded but still precious. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "About how far we've come. About Daniel and Miguel. About everything that had to happen, good and bad, to bring us here." Elena wrapped her arms around him from behind, resting her head against his back. "Do you think they'd be happy for us? I know they would. They'd love our kids, our grandkids, this life we've built. And they'd be proud that we didn't let grief destroy us, that we found each other and chose love." "Chose love," Elena repeated. "I like that, because it is a choice, isn't it? Every day, choosing connection over isolation, hope over despair, presence over numbness." "Every day," Marcus agreed. They stood together in the studio, surrounded by decades of artwork, physical evidence of every emotion they'd processed, every joy they'd celebrated, every grief they'd survived. The paintings weren't always technically perfect, but they were honest. They told the story of two people who had learned that healing isn't about forgetting or moving on. It's about integrating loss into a larger narrative, about honoring the past while building toward the future. Marcus thought about that first night in this studio, when he'd been so numb he couldn't even choose paint colors without overthinking it. When talking about feelings seemed impossible, and the idea of ever being happy again felt like a betrayal. He'd painted a storm that night, dark and violent and consuming. Now, 25 years later, he could paint storms and sunrises with equal honesty, could hold grief and gratitude simultaneously, could miss his brother desperately while also being profoundly grateful for the life he'd built. "Ready for bed?" Elena asked. "In a minute. I want to make one more thing." Marcus pulled out a fresh canvas, much smaller than most of their work. He selected paints carefully, mixing colors on his palette. Elena watched as he created a simple image, just a few brushstrokes really. Two hands clasped together, one with paint stains against a background of warm light. "For you," he said when he finished. "A reminder that we did this together, all of it. The healing, the building, the living, together." Elena took the small painting, tears in her eyes. "It's perfect, absolutely perfect." They turned off the studio lights and went upstairs to bed, to the room they'd shared for 25 years, to the life they'd chosen and built and protected. Outside, the city slept. At the fishing lake, water reflected stars. In Santa Fe, Elena's parents probably had photos of their grandchildren displayed prominently. All across the city, buildings Marcus had developed housed families, communities, dreams. And in Daniel and Miguel's memory, a foundation continued its work. Art therapy helped people heal. Two families had grown and intertwined, and love had proven itself stronger than loss. Marcus fell asleep holding his wife, grateful beyond measure for the day his therapist had insisted he try something different, for Elena's patient guidance as he learned to feel again, for the messy, beautiful life they'd created from grief and hope and paint and possibility. In the morning, he would wake and make coffee. Elena would have paint in her hair from some late-night project he'd slept through. Their granddaughter would probably call with some update about the twins. There would be foundation work to review, art classes to teach, dishes to wash, life to live. But tonight he was simply present, grateful, loved. And somewhere, he believed, Daniel and Miguel were at peace, knowing the people who loved them had found each other and chosen, every single day, to keep living fully in their honor. That was the greatest gift grief had taught them, Marcus realized as sleep claimed him. Not that loss didn't matter, but that the best way to honor those we've lost is to live with intention, love without reservation, and create beauty wherever we can. It was enough. It was everything. It was their story, and they had written it together, one brushstroke at a time.